Welcome once again to the Football Exponential Podcast. I'm Chika. I'm joined by Frank.
Hi, Chika. Hi, good day to our listeners. Welcome back to our show. I think this will be our cutting call for the European season today.
Yes, yes, yes.
But we'll still be back a lot because it's our favorite time of the season or favorite time of the football calendar, the transfer window.
We
So
transfer window, yeah.
we have a lot of juicy tidbits and discussions going forward. But let's talk about the recently concluded Champions League final between between Paris Saint-Germain and Inter Milan. It's can't even call it a final because I think a final just it basically implies that both teams went into the game with ambitious to win it.
Yeah.
But from kickoff, there was only one team in this game.
It
I
was
think
just
this is probably, and I know a lot of United fans are probably a lot of United fans are happy that finally the tag of the most one-sided Champions League final, the one in 2011 or 2000.
they had
I think
to.
2011. I think the one they played in London, in Wembley, the Barca won 3-1.
It was three
I
one.
think
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was I think it was that was the one that you say, okay, yeah. There was the gap between those two teams was just astronomical. But yesterday
It was brutal, and they said,
it was
according to statistics, no team has ever been beaten in the champion, or no team has ever lost 5 goals.
that's it.
The 5 goals margin is the Champions League final. Nobody has ever done that. This year
And
was the first time.
as a neutral, when it got to four, when it got to PSG got four. I was okay. Can they do what the Spanish team did against Italy? Or those in 2012 where they scored 4 goals. Casillas, okay, basically just guys, calm down. We don't need to score anymore. The game is done. No need to embarrass them. Just out of respect. But
Was
this
it the
PSG team,
Ochampi? Was it? Oh, did Kasi Azuda in the
yeah,
final? Oh yeah, with
yeah,
Balotelli. That
basically,
was
yeah, that was
what?
2012 Euro final.
Brandelli. That was one of my favorite coaches. Was coach of Fiorentina at the point. He went to I
Yeah,
think Cesar Brandelli squad. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Balotelli was the striker. Oh, was it
yeah,
4-0
exactly.
the final? I've forgotten what the final was.
Yeah, it was 4-0, 4-0 victory for Spain. And it's but I think with PSG yesterday, they never stopped playing football, and they were so good at every aspect of the game that they were just so dominant from kickoff. I think because we all know what in time now we're always going to do. They're going to surrender possession. They're going to go into the game. They'll counter attack, depend on set pieces.
Yeah.
They'll pick their moments when to attack Paris Saint-Germain. But the problem was when you play that way, when they when you play that way, you don't. And PSG play as good as they play, you don't get into the game. You couldn't because I think they couldn't get into the game at any moment in that first half particularly. I think the beautiful what was funny because I think PSG kicked off the game in the first
Yeah.
half. And what they did, they kicked it off. They just kicked it one long ball down to the throwing inside Inter Milan's half. And from there they just pressed. They just okay, we're gonna squeeze high of the pitch, press you guys as hard as possible, and we won't let you build any momentum from the back. They couldn't. Dembele was I think
Yeah.
that was one of the best pressing performances you see from a
That's
forward
one of
player
the. Yeah, yeah,
ever.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
He was literally outside on the line of the box, sprinting to press the goalkeeper every time he had the ball
It was sort of
from
like
goal
he
kick
didn't care about the
situations.
goals, assists. He just today was
It
just to
just
press.
usually
He said they
so
see him for the pressing.
exactly, and when you have a guy that is so good on the ball, I think Dembele has been one of the anointed players when he was very young. Like, okay, this is a guy that's going to be the next French great attacking player. He had, I think he flourished at Dortmund. Then he had the expensive move to Barcelona, where he didn't quite. I think it never quite fitted into what Barca were trying to do. Be it with him with his style of play, he's very flamboyant, very expressive way of playing football, and just like he had some issues as a younger player trying to find his way through football. Plus the injuries he had, then probably not doing the right stuff off the pitch as well.
Yeah.
But this is a guy that has locked in, and I think it was important. I think it was clear when Enrique was talking about the players or the man of the match or the standard players from the game. He said Ousmane Dembele played like a leader. I think we've all seen the videos that's been going around about him when he talked to Mbappe
Mbappe.
last
Yeah.
season. And I feel like every single thing he told Mbappe then, it didn't quite work out or didn't get Mbappe to get the message, but it seems he's found a way to connect that message to Dembele, and you see that with the performance yesterday. So that was interesting to see. But I think the standout performer of the day was the young kid, Desiree Doué. That
Yeah,
was
and funny enough, they said this Doue means in French, it means gift. Yeah,
yeah. Oh,
that was
that was
Lebov, the former Chelsea coach Frank Lebov that was
Frank
explaining
Leboeuf.
the meaning of Doue in French that it means gifts. I was like, and yesterday he said he, he's the youngest ever uh
Teenage goal scorer.
yeah, teenage goal scorer. Teenage goal scorer in the history of the Champions League. And you can't
Yeah.
believe, I think he's still 19, right?
Yeah, it's 19. It's
And
19.
funny enough,
And
Chelsea went for this guy. I remember.
but I
We
think
went
they
for no, I think it's Bacola. We went
it was
for.
no, it was, I think it was all of them because there was a period where it was him, where not just Chelsea, even I think Bayern Munich were in the mix as well. But again, when you have all these guys and you have all the club chasing them, but when a club like PSG gets involved, I think most times, especially the French guys, sorry, they're likely to go to PSG, especially Paris. They
Yeah,
would
yeah,
love
yeah,
to be at
yeah,
that
yeah.
club. And I think it's something
Especially
this
when they
new.
are just starting, towards the end,
Yeah,
when they are at that age, they always want to. And once they get to Paris, it's either Real Madrid or maybe Barcelona, or unless they are in decline. But naturally, they always want to go to Paris because I'm
yeah, and
hearing the same thing with Konate. I don't know the reason why he hasn't extended. And I'm hearing the same thing about Saliba. I don't know if, but all those guys are Paris. You know, um, sorry to go off. You know, Saliba's Kylian Mbappe's father was
yeah,
Saliba's coach as a youngster.
in France.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They played.
Okay,
His father was the coach in the neighborhood, whatever, Paris neighborhood or whatever it is.
okay,
Because I got
okay.
that from the commentator from the game. So they played together, and then I read out. They played together growing up. So they've been family friends. When you look at the game they had with Barcelona, the way Saliba wanted to stamp his himself in the game, you realize that was like a this thing. So
Yeah,
I think they don't have. I don't even know if there's any. They have Paris FC right now, but there are not so
yes,
many
Paris
clubs
FC.
in Paris. But and it's a very big city, extremely very very big city.
Yeah, it's like because I think we talked about like because in France the landscape of football in France is Paris Saint-Germain until recently they've not been the biggest club in French football. They're not
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
Manchester United or Liverpool. They're quite in terms of footballing success on the pitch. They're quite new to this, and it's always like because I think it's interesting because if you look at the fan base or the large fraction of the fan base is very um.
Younger.
Oh, I think he's younger, but he's not. I think it's more because the club they are right and they are like they have like that at an elite level. They've managed to bring all the big superstars, but it's not like it's not like Real Madrid, are a galactical club. They're
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
very
yeah, yeah.
Real Madrid is a prestigious club. Not to say Paris don't have prestigious history, but they're not. That I think
I
they are
don't know.
in a way that in a way that the people's club.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're like Liverpool in a way. Liverpool is the anti-establishment of the Premier
Yeah,
League
club. Yeah,
clubs.
yeah, yeah.
So but it's quite. But I think we like saw the scenes yesterday with the ultras. They were, I think the ultras. It was quite beautiful images coming from that. But
But
again,
the
the
ultras
performance of
haven't been all that. The ultras for all whatever history of PSG, I don't care. The ultras haven't been all that negative with the likes of. Let me give you an example. You can say because they haven't been winning anything. But Saint Etienne, for example, you know how the ultras treat them. You know how fierce it is. Marseille, for example, I think Bordeaux,
Leon,
for
yeah,
example, yeah, this for even Lyon to a very large extent. But you see, so I get what you're trying to say. They haven't been all those extreme like so many of the French clubs are.
exactly,
Marseille
yeah,
has that
yeah,
like crazy. Yeah,
yeah. But back to the stand-up performer yesterday, Desiree Doué, like because he's like the fearlessness with. that they played with yesterday, it looked. I don't know if it's I don't know if it's something with younger players these days because a lot of young players they get into this big games, this Champions League final, the Euro finals with Yamal last earlier this I think last year, but they don't get phased by the occasion. They play because you see like because like 'cause growing up, we always knew okay like when you get into this stage, your first touch could be bad, nerves
Yeah.
could affect you, but these guys they don't look out of place at this level and. To put in that performance he put in yesterday, especially for the pass for the first goal, the awareness, the composure to get the ball inside in a very busy box, get the ball, pick the right pass for the opening goal is just brilliant. And I think the second goal or his second goal of the night, the deflected finish, is just yeah how he just took time, picked his moment, got his shot off. It took a lucky deflection that went past the goalkeeper, but I think he was amazing yesterday alongside Dembele. And another player that was standout, I think Pacho at the back was a
Yeah.
very strong presence. It's rarely you see their Inter Milan front line have a bad game like they had yesterday. But the way he dominated Thuram, Martinez, and for the second goal, because I think the second goal he prevents the ball from going out for an Inter Milan corner kick, and that's where the attack starts from. That leads to the second Desiree Doue second Desiree Doue's first goal of the night. But I just and also another guy, Vitinha.
No,
Vitinha
Vitinha,
was
yeah, Vitinha is. I
Vitinha
wanted to say
is
Vitinha. Yeah, 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 yeah.
if
I
there was
wonder how Wolves felt he wasn't good enough. It's
but that's football though because I feel there's because you think about even think about like even currently now and even in the past there are a lot of footballers that have just the trajectory of their career has gone differently just because sometimes they've not been they've been at the wrong place at the right time wrong place at the wrong time or they've not had the right coach at the right time to guide them. See like again see Dembele is a guy that has been written off in
yeah,
terms
yeah, yeah.
of his but he goes to Paris and he's found a guy that's been able to able to direct
Back
him in a
then, I wouldn't
different
even
way.
get him for a pack of popcorn or chips. I,
Yeah,
I
I like
I was so
it.
annoyed with his record in Barcelona. He was always injured, and when he got injured, he played all the good games. Then his decision making was so terrible. It was so bad. And I think that it might have helped Lamine Yamal to grow because if he was still in the club, oh, he was playing on the other side. He was playing on Rafinha's wing, Rafinha's position, not Yamal position. He was preferred on the left.
No, it was. I think it was a mixture because then because I think Rafinha emerged last season. So before then he was almost on that right side playing, but it wasn't as fixed as it is now with Barca. Because when he had a lot of issues, he had fitness problems or his form wasn't quite good. But you could see with Xavi there was a bit of like Xavi was getting the best out of him
Yeah,
slowly,
yeah, 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 yeah.
but I think for whatever reason, I think even financial reasons for Barcelona, they were quite willing to let him go. And since because again this is a guy that was dropped earlier in the season during the league phase of the Champions League.
Against
He was dropped
Arsenal.
for against Arsenal because I think there was a training situation where Enrique didn't quite like. So this is not a guy that's been fantastic for a large period of time. It's just recently he's locked in. Like he's locked in and he's gone to a new level where he looks like the player we all believed he could be, but he's now playing with responsibility, leadership, and you because again like because most time you see in games like players they look they try and get that goal for themselves. So especially attack which is only fair because they're the main guy in that team. But I think his selfless performance yesterday was so good because it was always there were times where he could have taken a shot, but he was always looking for the right pass to the right player and just making the right decision at the right time. It was magnificent to watch.
I want to take you back to Luis Enrique back in 20 the World Cup. Was it the last World Cup, not the Euro? They were knocked out by Morocco in the quarterfinal.
The last World Cup, yeah,
The last World Cup in Qatar.
In Qatar.
Yeah. So they were knocked out were knocked out by Morocco, and then they beat. I think it was Croatia they beat, but I think it was on penalties or extra time. But it was a very difficult game.
So it was the Croatia was in the previous Euros where they
Oh,
beat I think they won because I was at that game they won Croatia 5-3 on 5-3 after Euro after extra time, and they lost the semi-final to Italy in that
Oh,
tournament. I
hold on.
think on
So hold on.
penalties.
So Enrique had two championships with Spain.
Yeah,
Oh, he had
yeah,
two.
yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah,
thought it
too.
was one.
Wait, no, no. I think it's even had. I think it's had three. In fact,
No, no, he didn't
I'm not
have
sure.
three. First
I
one
think
was, I
no,
think
because
Lopetegui, or if he was sacked. There was a time, no, he didn't have three. He had two. He must have had the World Cup and then the Euro. Who was in charge of Spain for the last? Okay, the Euro was in La Fontaine or something like that. The guy that won it.
no. I'm quite sure it's just keep talking. I'll
Yeah.
check it.
So now back to the Euro. If you remember when the one Morocco knocked him out, if you remember so well, all they did was pass, 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 pass. The passing was
Yeah,
without precision. All Spain did is knock it out, just keep knocking around. And it was the same way that PSG played. But against Manchester City, if you remember, they were 2 goals down against Manchester City. Everything changed after that game. At the end of the first half, they went in, they came in. They started passing with precision. They started passing with some intensity. And this is, well, I tell you, it could be, sometimes it could be with the caliber. Okay, let me give you an example of what I'm trying to say. This is not a knock on coaching, right? I feel, and this is the problem I have with Amorim. I have to go back there again. If you are playing a high intensity physical football, it is easy to use some players who are not your kind of players and at least get some results. If you look at Klopp, for example, the first time he took over Liverpool, his first game, there was a time he played Chelsea. I think it was the second game or his first game. You could tell what he wanted to do. It wasn't perfect, but it was very, very clear what he wanted to do. The only problem Klopp had was Liverpool wasn't consistent. That was, but today they will get it right, tomorrow they won't get it right. Now, you look at when it comes to the passing of playing the tiki taka or whatever, it seems it's different. That you have to get the very, very right caliber of players in order to play that system. It's totally different. But look at
yeah.
Enrique. This system is playing now with PSG. This is it's different from what Spain tried to do under him.
No, no.
So,
I know
what do you
because
think? Yeah, that's what I wanted to find out from you.
I
Yeah.
know because I've seen a lot of discussion about it. I think it's the same thing. But the difference is the quality of players you have. Where that Spanish national team, this was at the latter stage of the careers of Iniesta, Busquets. I think Xavi had retired
Aspilicueta
at
was
that
there
point.
also.
So if you look at like again, if you look at the actual players of that team, this is not a prime Spanish or prime collective of Spanish players. And when because again this because I think football is like the tactics. A lot of things you can do tactically requires heavily on what the players can do technically. So if you
Yeah.
want to play like the Barca with the tiki taka, the slow passing, and you don't have a player like Vitinha in your midfield, say you just swap out Vitinha for a guy like say like I don't know, say for like a guy like an Ugarte for example, because
Yeah.
Ugarte was at PSG last season. They move him off to United. They bring in Neves. The midfield is totally different. And with Vitinha, because why was at Wolves? They tried to fit him in one of those positions behind the striker, not in his position where he's playing as a playmaker in midfield. So I think you always have to get the quality of players has to be right to excel for any tactical framework to work because you cannot get Klopp can't play his gegenpressing system without a guy like Firmino, Mane, or Salah. The same way you see how hard working Dembele is playing this season. That system can't work without Dembele's pressing and his hard work, his movement off the ball and with the ball in that system. So you see, it's all I think it's all about timing sometimes. We have to get if you have to get your players right, you have to get them, and the messaging has to be clear and precise. Which with a guy like Amorim, I don't quite think the messaging, or I don't quite understand. I don't think the players understand what they have to do on the pitch, or they're not quite technically or physically good enough to execute it on the pitch. But I think but again with Enrique, it's just because this is a guy that's had I think his coaching career has been quite interesting because he had a decent job at Celta Vigo. Goes
It's
off
not
to
Roma.
Barcelona with yeah, yeah, this was after Roma, where she goes to Roma, and the brief then is how do you transition that Roma team transition that team away from Francesco Totti, make that team because I think at that point this was a quite old Roma team,
Yeah, it was overrated.
30s, the 30s and some other guys. How do you transform that team from a team that's very oldish to a team that's more young, playing possession based football, 4-3-3s in because I think back then 4-3-3s were not common in CR football. It was more basic 4-4-2, 4-4-1-1 or three at the back systems. So it took him. I don't think he didn't get a decent crack at it
Yeah,
in Roma. And again, because I think they signed a lot of players then as well, and very not all of those players were hits. I remember Boyan joined him, and it wasn't quite a successful period for him there as well. But I think at Barca, that is up until today. I think that's Barca team is his best team so far. I
yeah,
know
yeah,
this
yeah.
PSG team they've been fast, but I think that's the achievements of the MSN Rakitic,
But
Iniesta,
it didn't so
Busquets
bad.
partnership
It was
was.
average in Celta Vigo, though. I think they finished 10th or something like that before he got the Barca job.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
I know, but his ideas were quite clear when you watch that team play because with Barcelona it's not just it's not necessarily about winning, but it's about how you win. So when they've always looked for managers, even guys like Ernesto Valverde's, those guys, they've always looked at how they performed in their systems and how they saw football rather than if they were quite successful because they were not. It's hard to get it's hard to win in Spanish football if you're not a part of the elite clubs. So but I think Abasa was really that was his
and
top.
the highlight of his
Well,
career in Barca to me, yes, he won the league title. He won the Champions League against Juventus with MSN. But the highlight of his time in Barca was the what is it called in Spanish or whatever when he came from 4-0 down to beat PSG. You
um,
remember
Re-
Ramadona or what? I don't know what they call it. This
Remontada.
Remontada, yeah. When he came from four
And
goals down, I remember that game.
and it's quite interesting you mentioned that because that was against Paris Saint
PSG.
that was against PSG.
When
And
I
the
am
tag and the tag PSG had in those years was they were basically, for lack of better word, they were basically Tottenham. They were butlers then. They didn't know how to get over the line. They always, because I think they went into that tie. I think they had like a 3-goal advantage from the first leg.
yeah.
Then they scored in that game. They had an away goal, but they still found a way to lose that tie. It's been, but I think with him, it's been quite a journey, not just on the pitch, but even off the pitch. It all happened to what the tragedy he had in his personal life when he was head coach of the Spanish national team, and how he's been able to. Because again, that is not that's the kind of tragedy that could just put an end to any career, but the ability to take that personal hit in life and come back from that and still, because I think he's one of those guys that is spiritually is on a different level spiritual. Because whenever he talks about life, it doesn't just talk about football. It talks about life. Like there's
Yeah,
some people
yeah,
that just
yeah.
talk differently. I think he's on that level where he's very appreciative for all he's had, the time he spent with his daughter then, and how he tries to celebrate her every day by being the best person he can be. But in terms of football, what he's achieved because again this is Paris Saint-Germain's first Champions League,
Yeah.
which is important to say because this is a team that has spent a lot of money I think in the last 14 to 15 years since they got Qatari I think they got that new ownership. So but again, I think this is the crowning moment for them. But also want to talk about Inter Milan and how
Yeah, but I
and
wanted
when
to let me mention
yeah,
something.
go.
There's something you always say, and Simon Jordan always says, and I think if you look at it, I think I'm starting to realize that that is true. When you have someone ready to spend money and he just wants to continue spending money, he continues to spend the money over an extended period of time.
You
If he
get it
doesn't
right.
stop spending money, he will get it right.
Yeah,
He's,
you get it right.
he,
That's mhm,
he's going
mhm.
to make mistakes. And this person might get it right after 3 years. This person might get it right, but he will definitely get it right. I remember for in the last, let me say, 3 years, I remember players that they've signed, looked at the right players, but did not fit in. Nobody talks about the mistakes they've made, but they've made lots of mistakes, even in the last 2 years. I remember Areola was there. He was a home
Yeah,
goalkeeper. They went to Buffon at the
yeah,
time with Donnarumma. They even had Keylor Navas at the
yeah.
time.
At the time as well.
They tried old and tested. Areola was young. They went to Keylor Navas old. They went to Buffon old. They came to Donnarumma young. You look at Skriniar, I just remembered, was bought from Inter Milan. It was just like a year ago they signed him from Inter. And I remember they wanted to sign him at the end of the season, but they finally signed. Or they wanted to sign him in January. I think they waited till the end of the season or whatever. But they
Yeah,
paid
it
like
was a free
20
transfer.
something. Was it a free
I think
transfer?
it was. Yeah, I think it was a free
Okay, they
transfer.
wanted them to pay 20 something for him to come. They
Yeah,
waited till the end of the season. They had Frida, they had
yeah.
Ogate, who they just signed last 2 summers for close to 40 million. They hired Adrian Ramos, who is a striker, who they just signed after they was in the Euros. They have Colom Wani, who you rate so much, who they signed just like last 2 years. So I've called 4 players. They have Sergio Ramos, they have Messi. So you realize that they go here, they go here, they make they
There was no, and I think the exact word you're looking for is they didn't have identity for they lacked identity for a long time, and this also happens when you have the high turnover of coaches the way they've had. They've gone from the Unai Emery's, Pochettinos. I think they had a French manager as well there.
Garcia,
Christopher
Christopher Garcia.
Christopher Gatti was there. So when you have this high turnover managers, you struggle to first of all you have if you the more managers you change, the more players you have to buy and sell because that's just how it works. But with him now, they've since when they brought him last season, they seem the brief around the club was to or they've been trying to move away from the superstar signings or the last players looking for that last paycheck in European football. No more. They're not looking for guys like Ronaldo, who's looking for his last big contract before he retires, or Sergio Ramos. They looked
Yeah,
for younger players around Europe. Even a guy like Pacho, who went to Frankfurt from Belgium. I think he had a fantastic season there. Then he goes quite under the radar signing. He goes from Frankfurt to Paris Saint-Germain. I think he's been a rock at the back. He doesn't give mistakes. His passing is quite fantastic. He leads that line well. And you pair that guy with the experience of Marquinhos. So this is a guy that's been there for the last 12 years.
yeah,
He was I think he was one of the first major signings that
yeah, yeah,
ownership
yeah.
had alongside
Was he
with
sent from Roma?
yeah, it was from Roma alongside the I think that was during the Zlatan and Thiago Silva era when they just got new money. But when you and this is what you get when you get a guy like Enrique and you give him the time and the right allowances to get his players into that team because even from last season it was quite clear Ugarte was never going to play for him because Ugarte is a different type of player than what he requires in his midfield. And when you have the financial capability to make those mistakes in the window, then rectify them, just I think just a year after that, because again, these guys are not cheap. I think John Neves was about 60 million pounds signing from Benfica,
Mhm.
and it also helps. It also helps when you get clubs like United to help you cover
Yeah, from
your
Wolverhampton.
mistakes. Your mistakes in transfer window, because again, like you mentioned, Colomwani he's still on the books. This is a 90 million pound striker. He's still on the books.
Was it
They
90
don't,
million?
yeah, over 90 million euros. So, but it's because you always, but this, but always feel sometimes clubs always like the club that are always successful. They have that ability where if they make mistakes in the winter transfer window or transfers, they just don't stop and make those. Because you see some clubs, okay, this is not quite right, but you just try and
Yeah,
force it. Like I know you try, okay, we can make it work with this way, but you just okay. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of financial backing to just okay, he hasn't worked, move him off. Get the next guy. Okay, would you like then you scout around France and you see guys like Bradley Barcola emerging, there's a Doue
yeah,
emerging as well as two of the hottest French prospects. And when you pair that with what you already have with the experience of Marquinhos, Donnarumma has been is always I think Donnarumma has been quite questionable at times, but I think his Champions League campaign has probably been his
yeah.
alongside his
But you can't.
performances.
Well, you I, no, I woke up this morning. I said I will give him all his credit. You can't win the Euro and win the Champions League, and
without
he
being
was
elite.
you. And you tell me so. Whatever mistakes he makes, you have to give him the respect because he was. If not for him, Italy would never have won that Euro. At the same time, if he wasn't imposed, PSG would, because you look at the save that he made, even when they were ahead, you look at it, you are going to say, "Oh yeah, some goalkeepers
Yeah,
would let it go, but he didn't let it go."
and it's and I think it's one of those like I think it's one of those uh points in football where you know like that if you want to be a successful team, especially in knockout football, you only get as far as you can if you don't have and if you don't have an elite goalkeeper. You
Yeah,
always have to have an like if you look down, I think the only side in history that probably hasn't had an elite goalkeeper was Barcelona with Victor Valdes, but every other side, you without a question, you see Buffons that or either have an elite goalkeeper or have a goalkeeper that's playing to an elite level, like Edouard Mendy at Chelsea, where he wasn't,
yeah. Kelo,
he's not,
also Kelo Navas, also yeah. I'm
that
very very
is
yeah.
they're not the best of goalkeepers, but in that moment for a period of 6 months, he just turns to this fantastic goalkeeper that's been a rock for Chelsea at that time. But with Donnarumma, even not just the game against Arsenal, but the games against Liverpool away from Liverpool at Anfield. But I think his best performance was against Aston Villa in the return leg
Yeah.
in that was because that was against a Villa team that showed signs of a comeback in that particular time.
One more
But shout out to
question
Donnarumma.
before we move to
Yeah,
Inter. I thought about something yesterday. I said this is really very very bad. Look at the names. Desire,
yeah.
Desire, Doue,
There's a Doyle.
one,
Yeah,
Bakola, two.
yeah.
You have
Mbappe.
Ryan Sheki, whatever, three. Do you think um, Michael Olise can start for France?
Okay, okay. Oh no, okay. Wait, okay. So I think the first question you have to, or the first question you have to ask is, suppose is Didier Deschamps still head coach? And if he's still the head coach, the answer is no. There's because I'll tell you for free, there's no way Didier Deschamps is going to this international tournament with all these flair players running around on the pitch at the same time. There's no way it's happening. He's gonna go there, play Kante, Rabiot, Kamavinga, then you play whether you play
Chomini.
you play Chomeni, Thuram, and you play Thuram and Mbappe up front. I think he's like I think his own style of coaching at that level. Because again, I think he's had relative success at that level. So he clearly knows what he's doing. But for the talent that France has, it's not I don't think he maximizes that talent in
No,
that
he
squad.
doesn't
Because again, you
maximize them.
mentioned
He doesn't
because
maximize.
because again you mentioned all the guys. There's Mbappe, there's Mbappe and Dembele on this form. It's that is crazy. Then you have the young guys only say, but the problem is how do you get the balance right in this team? Because all these guys you call are guys that play in the final third of the pitch. How do you get the right? And again, because sometimes I always feel when you have too many, when you're paused for options, you don't quite know who's the best player for this team. Who's because like you said now, like just even thinking about it now, I don't know how to structure an attack with these guys. Who plays through the middle? Who plays on the wing? Who
Yeah,
plays
it's
behind this?
difficult.
So it's so, but I think with him, his default is always going to be safe. He's probably going to play with four centre backs at the back, no overlapping full backs. He'll play with two defensive midfielders, Tchouameni and Kante. I think if you're lucky, you get Mbappe and Dembele playing together. But with him, I don't know. But again, with French football, this is nothing new. They've always had that talent in that team. They've had the Benzemas, Mbappe, Pogba's, Griezmann's. It's always how you get the right combination in. So it's been interesting to see how they play. I think they have the Nations League semi-final or final coming up later this month. So it'll be interesting to see how they. I think they're playing against Spain in their semi-final. So it'll be interesting to see how they perform.
Okay, let's go to Inter. Where do they go from here? What if okay, let me I have two questions for you. The second one was going to be where do they let's go with the first one. If Enrique prepared for Inter, because if you look at it from the beginning, you realize they prepared for Inter. They stopped. Now, I never realized someone was so instrumental or so vital for what Inter do. So all they did was not all they did a lot of things, but the easiest thing they did was Mbappe was always pressing, didn't allow someone to have any time on the ball. Then they did
Yeah,
as the way he was pressing, other players were pressing them. So Inter were never had any spare man to pass the ball to build their passes. So if he did it this way, what was Inter Milan coach supposed to do and what didn't he do? Because if you have 1-0, you have 2-0, you can decide, listen, guys, let's make no mistakes. Let's just leave it.
let's look through.
And even
Yeah.
the problem I have with Inter is not like they were trying to overload PSG and they consider they were dominated. So how do you think Simeone Inzaghi got it wrong?
So I think we Inter, you need to go back a few weeks. I think you need to go back to there was a particular week in that domestic calendar where they lost. I think they lost the semi-final to AC Milan in the cup. Because again, because time now they were running for three trophies at that time. They were top of Serie A table, the top of the Serie A table, and they had the semi-final against AC Milan. They get trashed in that semi-final. I think 3-0. They get trashed in that semi-final, and then they lose again against Bologna in the Serie A. Then they surrender the lead to Napoli. And at that same time, they had the Barcelona semi-final. By that point, they had not scored. They had the run. They went three games domestically where they didn't score a goal. And if you watch them, they looked very leggy. They looked very tired. They look like a team that ran out of ideas. But against Barca, they found a way to perform and get what and get the job done. But even when you watch them after that semi-final, even the last game of the season against Como, they made changes to the to line up. They changed there was no Lataro. I think I think he had an injury. So which posed the question, how fit was Lataro yesterday? And it didn't look
Uh,
it, I think his fitness, he didn't look as fit as or as mobile as he always does. And guys like Barella, who plays a lot of minutes, who runs with it or plays with intensity. How fresh was he yesterday? Because a lot of them they looked tired, and with a guy like Achebe, that's 37-year-old centre back. He looked like a 37-year-old centre back playing
yeah,
against
yeah, yeah.
a young, quick attack. He looked out of pace. Pavard had not played for over a month. He starts yesterday. How fit was he? How much ready was he again? And with I think the Mark was probably
Was very
the most
disappointed.
unfortunate player on. I was disappointed, probably the most unfortunate player on the pitch as well because when he just had a bad game. He just like from the start of the game until he got substituted. But even if you look at the substitutions Inter Milan made, they did not make an attacking change in that yesterday. And if you look at the bench, they don't have the bench to make any of the like compare that to Paris Saint-Germain's bench and the quality they have in depth. But this is a team that has which again I think is credit to Inzaghi because we talked about PSG's financial muscle, but it's the opposite at Inter Milan where they don't quite spend a lot of money. Like I think their biggest transfer since he's been at the club was Pavard from Bayern Munich for about 30
Um,
million euros or so. So they pick a lot of players on the free transfers here, and they got Fratesi for quite a reasonable sum, and the other guys that he met at the club, the Bastonis, the Chebis and Co. But this is just a manager that's been able to squeeze every amount of quality from this group. And I just felt yesterday it was a step too far for them, where they come up against a team that is so quick, so agile, so tactically well prepared. And then and with how Inter Milan set up with the three at the back, which was always my worry for them going to that PSG don't play with a recognized striker. They have a lot of guys going into the box. You saw Hakim was there a few times. Dembele,
Exactly.
they keep rotating. They rotate a lot in that attacking position. So who if you have if you have three center defenders, who can they pick out? They have no obvious target to pick out. So you also have guys sitting behind the ball, and it's always It's the hardest thing to do on the pitch when you come up against a team that moves the ball quite quickly. People are
Yeah.
rotating, they're rotating positions. You can't quite um lock down where players are in terms of their movement. But again, I think this is I think they'll be very disappointed. And to what extent the rumors about Simeone Inzaghi being linked to a club in Saudi, I don't know to what extent that played a part in their preparations leading up to final. It obviously does not help. And because again, it's not.
And what bothers me about Inter, my only worry is people suffer losses. This is their second loss. Is this loss is more of a positive than negative because to me, for you to lose the
I think the
Champions League
negative.
final, it seems a negative.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, most
because
people think
if
it's
you
a negative because history will,
no, no,
but
no,
you have to qualify to play the final.
yeah, and yeah, of course, again, that's true. But again, if you look at how the season has panned out for them, they've gone
So it's a way
from a
negative. It's
potential.
a negative. You can't lose straight.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
they've gone to the season with they're obviously favorites for this year Serie A title, and the Champions League is always an added bonus. But when you lose it in this manner and perform in the manner at which they did yesterday, you can only come out with more questions. And you look at the team now. Okay, is Inzaghi going to be there next year?
How many
This
league
team
titles
needs
does
a
he have?
lot.
One, right? He didn't
I
win it
think
in his
it's two.
first season. He didn't win it. AC
Is
Milan
it?
won it. The season he played, then Napoli won it. AC or AC Milan won it. Napoli won it. He won it, and then no, he's only had one league title. That's
It's one. It's
yeah,
one league
because
title, and that was
AC
one
before that AC got one, Zaghi got one, Napoli got one. Last season, who got it last season? I think it's
last
Inter.
last season
So
was
last
internal,
season
but it's
was the
got
first. So AC was the first. Napoli was the second. He's the third person. This season,
yeah,
last Napoli have come back to get the second one. So
yeah.
it doesn't really. And Copa. I think one Copa is all he has. So
No, he
it,
has he has two copas and three super Coppa Italians. So, but I think with him, Inzaghi has always been. I think it's the opposite to Conte, where his strengths lie more in knockout football
yeah, yeah, yeah.
than in the domestic calendar, domestic league, or where he that I think he tries more in knockouts, and you see it's where they've got to two Champions League finals. Of course, they've not won one, but again, I think it shows how good of a manager is at this level. But the question is, okay, how do you then go forward? One, is he going to stay because he has an offer from Saudi? And if he does leave, how do you continue with what you already have with the same guy that plays the
If
same
he leaves,
system?
it's catastrophic for them.
But
It's
also I say,
extremely because two things is that they don't have the pool. We talked about pool.
but
We looked at PSG. Most point players want to play for PSG. Inter doesn't have that pool in Serie A. Bayern Munich has it. There's Juventus, there's AC Milan. So most of these clubs, the likes of Celtic, they have the pool because in their league they can always get the regular league guys that are going to feel I don't want to go to Chelsea. I'm too young. I don't let me just be around. You understand? So they don't
yeah,
have that.
yeah, I
They now
understand.
have to pay. Then secondly, you look at the players they have. I don't think they are progressing. They've done good job with
The
Bastoni, Bisek, and some players, but they are only going to get older, and they don't spend money. So
yeah,
I'm begging him to stay. I'll go on my knees because I don't think so. Any other person can come in and they will get to the second round at
but
best quarterfinal of Champions League, but getting to the final, they don't spend money, so they're
I know,
overachieving.
I know, but don't you think it gets to the point where the question, okay, if do you continue what you have, like, okay, you make the right transfers for players in the squad, or do you look for a complete refresh in that team? Say Inzaghi leaves, you look for a younger manager, say Fabregas, for example, a guy who's just, and you can use this opportunity to refresh the squad, get the squad a lot, reduce the average age of the team. You got guys like guys like Mkhitaryan, Shanoglu, Achebi. These are guys in that 35 plus. Do you move these guys on? And also, do you even contemplate selling your price assets in the team, like guys like Lautaro Martinez? Because they talk like we know that financially they're not the strongest of teams in Europe, do you consider selling Martinez and reinvest in the team's long term potential? Because with them it's very and also I also feel it's not just for Inter. I think as Italian football as a whole. I look at the conditions of the top teams in Italian football. AC Milan are not in Europe next year. Juventus they're somewhat in the wilderness in terms of what they're trying to achieve as a football club. Now they have Napoli will be back in the Champions League with Conte. That's if he stays. And we all know Conte's record in European football. It's not the best. So do you get a situation where the Italian clubs are just they all struggle in Europe next year, or they're not their best selves in European football? Because it's because I think in the last few years, Inter Milan have been the best of Italian teams in Europe. And when a club that's meant to be this good gets gets put to the sword, the way they got dealt with yesterday in the final, it's only obvious that you have to ask questions about where Italian football is going, because it's not. I have this weird feeling about it because it's not like in England, for example, in Spain, where Barca and Real Madrid are always going to be pushing. Either they're spending or they're winning. It's and with those two clubs, they're always going to be there. English clubs always have the money. They can sometimes they get it right, they get it wrong. But even clubs like Aston Villa are performing that they won't be in Europe, they won't be in the Champions League next year, but are showing potential. Newcastle will be there. They'll put it Chelsea. We don't know what Chelsea can put up next year, but we've seen in the past Chelsea don't have to be very good to do well in the Champions League. They always have this they have heritage in that competition. But with Italian clubs, it's I think it's looking the future is not looking bright for Italian clubs in European football.
I said I'm writing something down. If I'm Inter, two very prized assets have to go.
Okay.
Two very, very prized assets. When I mean prized assets, I mean Toram, I mean the Bishek, I mean Barella, I mean Lautaro Martinez, I mean Bastoni. Two has to
I
go.
think okay,
I'll
okay. I
I'll
I,
go
I
for
think
Lautaro Bastoni because you can keep
you
Pavard
can't say Bastoni. You can't say Bastoni. You can, I feel I don't. I
because
know a lot of people say
Bastoni will get more
Martinez.
money than Bishek or the what happened.
Yeah, but it's again. I think again it's a tough call because even if you look even at that number one goalkeeper, he's Jan Sommer is about 35. So even everywhere across the pitch, they need to think about a lot of decisions. But I think my opinion, I think Bastoni and Barella are the two untouchables in that team. Those two have to be there because if because I think that it's always I think it's a tough balancing act when you try and rebuild your team because you also want to you don't want to sell the guys that I mean the guys that are Inter Milan through and through. Like I think Barella represents what Inter Milan are right now. Bastoni is one of the best centre backs in
Because
European
if,
football.
if they
Don't
if they content themselves in challenging for Serie A for the next 3 years at least before you start thinking of going to the Champions League final, you get 30 million for three players in Serie A within Serie A, be it Cuomo, be it wherever you are getting those players. I think they
well,
should be good in Serie A because Conte's
okay.
squad wasn't fantastically.
Yeah, that's true. And again, speaking of Conte, we all know he's not the most stable of characters. And saying Zaghi agrees a deal to go to Saudi Arabia. Do you think Inter Milan can tempt Conte to come back?
I won't have Conte. I'll get so it,
No, no. Because the reason I ask because with Conte can come in and say you sell players you need to sell, you generate what you need to generate. Conte is the one guy that I think I believe in 2 years can give you a Serie A title.
yes, he can.
Like that at this point that is almost guaranteed. In 2 years he gets you one Serie A title minimum. But it's not going to be you're not going to be a force in Europe. So do you trust the devil or you go out there for a
No,
younger,
you know
fresher
why?
manager? You go out,
The reason if there's any league I feel people underrate their local managers easily. They have so many promising. Look at the guy in Bologna that just moved
But
from.
I know, no, but check out. We saw Juventus go down that path with Thiago Motta this year, and how quick they were to terminate that whole project because at the same time is there are a lot of young managers there, but to this, especially the top clubs give or they allow these managers time they need to
They don't.
build
They
what
don't.
they need to build. So again, I think it's a very because like Fabregas has shown he's a very capable young coach right now. With his ideas are come up. But if you put Conte in this Fabregas in this Inter Milan situation, can he handle the pressure? Can he maintain what is built at a club like Inter Milan? And how long are you willing to be patient with what he's trying to do? Because it's very I think it's always tough to balance it because you have to because like you said there are a lot of young managers in Italian football, the likes of Italiano, even Palladino who just left
Yeah,
Fiorentina. But with Inter Milan, a club that demands winning, a very ambitious club. So it's
I get it. It's a lot difficult.
I think there's a lot to think about there. But again, I think the simple choice could be Inzaghi stays another year, and you sell a few players that are not essential to the squad. So you keep the laterals, keep two around. I think Lautaro and Thuram, that's a good starting point for any team in Euro. You have Baston at the back. You can get with a guy like Pepe Morata, who always
Yeah,
I think he's always serving the transfer window. You can always get a deal here and there. You can build. You can make few changes without making
because it's
wholesale
clear
changes
that
to the whole
one of the
squad.
reasons why they failed woefully against PSG, they don't have the legs to, with the pressing, the excessive
Yeah,
running. That the squad is just so old. You need
yeah.
to take
It's
that outside. That's the
and like
problem.
because I feel even for them because with how they go about it, they don't. Or the last attacking acquisitions, they look at the guys like the free transfers, Teremi, Anatovic,
Mm.
um, Correa. These are not Champions League
Those
level
are not.
players, or
Those
even
are not. Those are not.
so. And when you run into trouble like they did yesterday, you sometimes you can rely on guys coming off the bench to change the game for you. But when you don't have that exact quality, sometimes it pays off. Like against Barcelona, Fratesi and Taremi came off the bench and played well, but against the dominant PSG side that were just too good for you yesterday from kickoff, it just seems like a tall order for that team.
Okay. I think.
Well,
Yeah, I'm listening.
so let's give out just a quick one. Our this a few one. Who do you think is the standout player this year's Champions League?
Right? I think I'll say Lamine Yamal.
Yamal? No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I said Yamal because of just one reason.
Yeah.
There are so many players that were standing just like him, but the reason I give it to him is the responsibility he had for Barcelona. To me, is more than every other person had for their team. You look at
Even
PSG, you
if
have
yeah. Okay.
Kvaratskhelia, you have Doue, you have Dembele.
Yeah.
You understand the levels of Lamine Yamal and Rafinha to me is way higher. People rave about Pedri, but you have to watch the ball very, very closely. Look at the stats in order to really. You don't just put on the TV and see Pedri. The same with Kubasi. So I'm looking at the importance of one player to a particular team for the tournament. That's why I go for Yamal.
Yeah.
Yeah, who do you go for?
I'll go for Dembele. I'll go for because again, it's important to add that in the last few years, there's been a lot of talk about Ballon d'Or awards, this best awards, and it always comes down, oh, who's won the Champions League? So I think I'll be remiss not to pick a standard candidate from
I think
the
he win
winning
the
team.
Champions League.
So
They'll be
and
very,
again,
very. They'll be causing more harm to the award if they don't give him that because what's the precedence? Now, what do you deny him? He because normally they say, "Oh, he was the best player, but he never won." Now again, you're that I don't. People can vote, but I doubt. And the problem Yamal will have is they will say he's too young, he's still young, he will still win it later in his future. I think
And
Dembele will win the Ballon d'Or.
yeah, and I think again, like, because the Ballon d'Or is I think it's always held in Paris or in France, if I'm
I
not
think-
wrong.
Yeah,
And I think Dembele's nationality will play a big part for him. But at the same time, I just think with all the politics and all that, I think he's a standout candidate. Because again, do you want to go into this situation where you give the award without considering what that person has won? Because sometimes the best player ends up winning it, and most times it's not quite so. But I think in this situation, I think Dembele is a fair shout for player of the tournament. But I'm going to cheat right now. I'll say Dembele player of tournament and Yamal young player of the tournament. Because I agree with you. I think Yamal has been the player I've enjoyed watching the most this Champions League.
yeah.
So I think that's another shout.
Okay, who do you consider as the midfielder of the uh,
Dec- Declan Rice. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm joking. Two free kicks don't get you best midfielder in tournament. No, but best midfielder it's Vitinha.
Vitinha? Yeah,
It's yeah,
you know
yeah,
me.
it's Vitinha.
But
I
also
thought,
I understand what it's gonna be because Declan Rice faced Vitinha in the quarter in the semi final and then well he had a good tournament also. Declan Rice had
I
a
know,
very
no,
very good tournament.
because yeah, I did, but I think with Vitinha, and I think one goal in that final, I think it's the third goal. The third goal just shows how good this guy is because you see, because he basically runs that whole attack by himself. He starts it, passes the ball to midfield, continues his run, gets it again, then plays Desiree Doue through and goal for the assist and the third goal. I think Vitinha has by far been the standard player. And this is, and in terms of, we'll talk about future transfers in our next segment, but I think it could be one of the most sought out midfielder in European football right now.
Yeah.
Because I think if you get a player like Vitinha in your team, he solves basically all your midfield problems. Like the progression of keeping the ball, progression of the ball, control, everything. Like just think about Real Madrid right now with Vitinha and Valverde in that midfield.
Yeah.
That like I
Yeah, yeah,
think
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah,
I
yeah.
I feel Real Madrid should move anything movable right now to get Vitinha in there. And I mean sell if you need to sell the Vinicius, for example, you sell the Vinicius to get Vitinha. You sell Rodrigo to get him. Sell Bobby Charlton. You sell Bobby Charlton to get Vitinha today. Because if you get a
And
player like him,
also apart from selling Vitinha, if you have a will I say a 6 or an 8, depending on how you see him, a player who can play defensive and play attack at the same time, very, very good. If you
is the
bring
best.
two of those players together, you get the best from both of them. If you look at Valverde, you understand what I'm trying to say. For
Yeah,
example,
because it's like, I think you can call him the heir apparent to a Modric, a player that
yeah,
knows how to that can defend like the best of them, create like the best of them, and control the game like the best of them. I think right now Vitinha is that guy, and, but I think Paris obviously have big ambitions for the
so
club going forward. I think
what one of your best defender?
before the final yesterday, I was going to say Bastoni, but now I'm going to go for Pacho, William Pacho.
How are you reading my mind? I just want to.
I'm
I was afraid
I'm
you
I'm
don't
go-
say Patrick. I
I'm
was
I'm
afraid you
I'm
don't
gonna go
say
for
Patrick.
because again, like he was a wall yesterday. Like he was a
Apart from
really
yesterday, the reason why I'm giving him is that if you're looking at the best players in the Champions League, right? You're looking at players who play from the left. You look at Salah, you look at Saka. For you to go
Mhm.
against Salah and Saka in 2 games, and both are having very good season because you look at the game before, you can say, oh, Saka was injured or Saka, but Saka had a very good game against Real Madrid. So you
Yeah.
can't have either way. So for him to play against Real Madrid and then have a very, very good game come out, I would say Pacho is my best defender for the
Yeah,
season. And it's not shocking because you look at this season Champions League, the only team that dominated opponents and played this well was Barcelona. Inter didn't really dominate. So
no, yeah,
PSG were just
it's
the best team. Sometimes not really the best team wins they were
yeah,
just the best team. Because Barcelona, even though they were conceding, they were- Liverpool had a very good in the group stage. They were like impeccable. But as soon as
yeah.
they met PSG, it was like it wasn't the same Liverpool team. I don't know what happened.
No, but I think it's also, but I think it's funny you say that because I think Liverpool won away in Paris the first leg,
Yeah.
and the second leg they concede a goal, they lose on penalties, they lose to the lottery penalty. So it's again with football, it's the fine margins of how you go about games. But I think overall across the knockout ties because they came up against the best English teams could put out Liverpool, Aston Villa, Arsenal in semi-finals, and they beat one of the best defensive sides in the tournament, Inter Milan, by five. It could have been 6-7 yesterday. They completely outplayed that team. So I think I, I I think the award in terms of awards, I expect Paris Saint-Germain to dominate individual and any collective awards in the next few months. So, but that leads us to the last one, goalkeeper of the year.
I was thinking between some and uh I'll still give them a Donnarumma because
Yeah.
Raya didn't do
No,
so enough.
I
Courtois didn't, he
think
wasn't really there. Allison, well, he went out so early, so I can't give you player of the tournament or the year when he went
yeah,
out in the second round. So then Neuer, it still
no, yeah,
becomes
no,
Donnarumma
yeah.
because
I,
what makes me have problem with Summer is that you considered 5 and 4 goals. You understand against
I, and because again, I think we Yansoma he's always been a very good goalkeeper. But yesterday, and you always expect him to come up with big saves. But yesterday, not due to no fault of, I don't think I don't think he had any mistake, made a mistake on any of the goals. He just the finishing yesterday was just so good. Like he couldn't prevent any of those goals yesterday. I think the second one was the one that was probably the most disappointing, where he takes a deflection from the defender and goes past him. But I think he couldn't. I think he couldn't get anywhere near any of those shots and finishes yesterday. But I think Donnarumma's performances against Arsenal away from home at the Emirates Stadium, where there were two big saves he made against Trossard and against Martinelli
yeah.
when Arsenal were going to the game. And I think he made a few more saves against Aston Villa when they were trying to make a comeback, and his performance in the shootout as well against Liverpool.
Mhm.
And yesterday he didn't have a lot to do yesterday, but you saw it, like his goalkeeping as on set pieces yesterday was standout for PSG yesterday. But I think across the competition, knockout games, I think he's been probably the better of goalkeepers than someone to say. But it could have easily been Jan Sommer because he also had good performances. But
Yeah, 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 yeah.
when but I think when you're that dominant in the final and you play that well across the knockouts, I think it's only fair you get it. But again, we could be. I know a lot of people have different opinions, but I think I'm quite confident to give to make because I think this is a Paris Saint-Germain clean sweep: goalkeeper,
Yeah, yeah.
midfielder,
Yeah, it's true.
and
And
player.
they were so good. Like, apart, it's hard to say there's no game because even the game Liverpool beat them, I think they were even
Yeah,
better
Alice.
in the first leg than the second leg that
Yeah,
ended it. So it's been
no,
a
that
it's,
that first leg, I think that first leg performance in the tie against Liverpool probably it was fantastic. And the performance against Arsenal, the first half in the first 20 minutes, and also yesterday is some of the best football you see
the
at this level.
the only bad game they had, and it was a terrible game, was against Aston Villa at the Villa Park. in the second half
Yeah, and
when they collapsed. So it was
yeah,
like
but
only a bad 45 minutes.
but even I think even then they found a way to manage their way through that game because I think they go there with a 2 goal advantage. They scored 2 goals early on.
Yeah.
I don't know how. I don't know whether that they let their guard down a bit, but I think across the whole tournament they've been in the knockout they've been fantastic.
Okay, well, that should be all for us today. Smash the like button, like, subscribe, comment. Frank, anything for
All
our,
the good
our
stuff.
viewers?
No, I think this I think this episode concludes our season, our coverage of the football season until the Club World Cup starts again in
Yeah.
2 weeks. But I think this journey has been very entertaining and very exciting on this platform. I think I'm looking forward to more growth and more conversations about football going forward.
Thanks a lot, viewers. Bye
Yeah,
bye.
yeah. Catch you later.